Maori believe the Kaingaroa to be the only man-made forest visible from the moon. Pākehā believe in the ever-upward spiral of property values, and the Chinese, well, who knows what the Chinese believe. Whichever way you look at it, New Zealand is a country founded on strange beliefs. Maori legend tells us that the great explorer Kupe discovered New Zealand after chasing a giant octopus. He then returned home with the news of his discovery, at which point the great fleet was dispatched to settle the new land. We believed the story for generations, but by the 1990s, new information had become available, forcing New Zealanders to drastically reconsider their origins. And it came from a surprising source.
This man tells us that he is a prophet, and perhaps he is the last prophet. He's spent time with extraterrestrials. He's even been to a planet or a homeland where these extraterrestrials live. He's travelled in their space vehicles. He has even made love to a robot on this planet. These are incredible claims, and he is here with us today. Rael, you are the founder of a movement, which is called the what?
International Raelian Movement.
International Raelian.
When Rael visited us, we learnt that New Zealand, like the rest of the world, was actually discovered by aliens.
And I saw suddenly in the sky a very strong flashing light. And then something like a flattened bell made of a very shining silver metal was slowly coming down. It was about 7 meters of diameter and without any noise coming from the sky.
Rael claimed he met aliens and was on a mission to set up an embassy for them here on Earth.
But with large almond-shaped eyes, long, straight black hair, a little beard, a face a little bit like Japanese people.
Despite his meeting with Rael, Bob Parker never became a Raelian, but he did go on to become Mayor of Banks Peninsula, which is almost as good.
And your clothes are quite unusual, aren't they? Quite different. Is there a specific reason for that?
Despite New Zealand ranking high on the OECD's list of stupid nations, Kiwis are naturally sceptical. And like Rael, Uri Geller was given a hard time when he visited in the 1970s.
Well, that brings me to a challenge that one of our local psychologists has apparently issued to you, Dr. David Marks. He said that if you would go along to his laboratory and perform some tests there for him, he could determine whether your powers were telepathic or not. Are you prepared to accept that challenge?
I don't accept challenges anywhere, if it's Mr. Marks or the Queen of England. I've never accepted challenges. I felt quite happy with the experiments I've done at the University of London and at Stanford Research Institute. There will always be skeptics around, and that's it.
How do you feel about these now? Are you happy?
I don't feel about them at all because I don't like this interview. It was very nice talking to you. Thank you.
But not everyone doubted Yuri's power.
Well, I was writing the letter and watching him bend this key, and I didn't take much more notice of it until I went to bed last night, until I was going to bed, and I took my stuff out of my pocket, and I noticed all my keys were bent.
Did you believe in these sort of powers before, Mr. Curtis?
No.
What do you feel now?
Well, I don't know. I just don't know what to believe now.
What are the keys for?
Oh, this one's for my house, this one's for my van, this one's for my car, and this one's for the boot of my car.
I think Uri Geller's coming down here. Are you going to tell him about this?
Yes, I'm going to go and see if I can see him and ask for an explanation.
And for compensation.
The piece that created the most interest throughout the year was the chat with George and Kathy Lotz, the couple that lived the 28 days with the Amityville Horror.
This is the spooky couple whose visions inspired the so-called Amityville Horror.
There was another occasion when we were sitting in the living room and our attention was drawn to a window that was in the corner of the room. and there was a set of beady red eyes staring back at us.
But even more horrifying than Amityville are the boulders of Maori. Early Catholics thought these boulders were the eggs of evil dragons from the heavens. We now know that these boulders didn't come from Mars like the missionaries postulated. They came from somewhere much closer to home. It wasn't until the 1960s that science proved that these petrified taniwha eggs actually came from somewhere near Taupo, possibly thrown up by the Great Eruption in 130 BC.
The petrified dragon eggs are placed in a parabolic chamber where scientists can determine their structure, age and provenance, proving conclusively that taniwhas did indeed exist.
Do taniwhas exist?
To what?
Do taniwhas exist?
Taniwhas? Of course not. We're not on air now, are we?
You're on.
Oh, we are? All right, go on.
No.
But do you want to ask that one again?
Yeah. Do taniwhas exist?
No, of course they don't, but I don't mind that sort of nonsense going on as long as unfortunately so often happens with these Maori things, it ends up with people having to pay money to them. Now, it's no different believing than that than believing in stupid bloody religions, etc. But at least they don't hit the taxpayer, the Catholics and the Anglicans and the rest of it.
Belief in superstitious nonsense is nothing new, but as far-fetched as those beliefs held by early Maori were, nothing quite compares to the stupidity of modern middle-class Pākehā. As early as 1974, some soft-headed Kiwis had had enough of medical science and decided to head to the Philippines to try out a new form of therapy, psychic surgery.
I was lying back enjoying it, and the next minute I felt the pressure of hands, the piercing of skin, and the hands inside my body twisting bone, and it sort of brought on quite a shock.
With some dexterous use of chicken giblets, gullible New Zealanders were easily fleeced by the wily foreigners.
Smile. Come on, smile. And next time we'll do here. Please.
How do you feel? I feel fine now, but I did feel it a little.
It's the truth.
For generations, Maori used this giant structure to tell time by measuring the sun's movement across the sky. Sadly, daylight savings put an end to this Stonehenge. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't move the giant pillars to put the clock back an hour. Pākehā had little time for Maori beliefs, but Maori had faith enough in Pākehā beliefs to fight the white man's wars. The deeds of the famous Maori battalion are the stuff of legend. Less acknowledged are the heroics of New Zealand's World War II Special Forces. The 43rd Battalion, or Special Needs Forces, comprised of men usually considered unfit for service. As the war dragged on and casualties mounted, the army, desperate for new recruits, turned to New Zealand's mental institutes. David Bray's intellectually handicapped grandfather was among the first called up.
Granddad had the body of a 25-year-old but the mind of a 4-year-old. And no one in the family really ever thought they'd see him again, to be honest.
Many thought the men doomed, but their mental instability and limited intelligence made them highly unpredictable on the battlefield.
They were good fighters, good troops. They were damn good troops.
They had no concept of fear. They had no concept of anything, really. Just had no idea.
The Special Needs Forces first saw action in North Africa, where they made an immediate impact.
The New Zealand soldiers are proving a handful, especially their defects. Yesterday, I lost 15 men when one of them ran at us with a hand grenade stuffed in his rectum.
Despite being unable to understand or follow orders, the men of the 43rd won more battles than they lost. Their leader was Captain Douglas Winchester Burns. A long-time Sunnyseat resident, Burns was an idiot savant.
Burns was mad. He was completely mad. But he did have an extraordinary memory. He could take one look at a place, an enemy base, for instance, and hours later reconstruct it exactly using just matchsticks. That made him very useful.
They were a famous division, and they fought very well indeed. Of course, their quarters were a mess, poos everywhere, some drooling, but very brave.
A lot of revisionists question the ethics of the Special Needs Forces. You know, is it right to send retards into battle?
No, I don't think he was exploited. I think it gave him a real chance to learn.
Though of limited intelligence, it's unlikely that the men of the Special Needs Forces would have fallen for this particular shaggy dog story from the 1980s.
The suburbs are fighting back in the Third World War, and the mutt's on the run.
Walk down any street in the suburbs, and it's not difficult to spot the anti-dog turd secret weapon. Just a container full of water on a lawn. There's one down there.
The idea was that dogs would not defecate on lawns if they saw plastic bottles filled with water. The craze swept the nation, but sadly, the dogs kept right on shitting. As a nation, we have long been entranced by cylindrical objects, whether they be bottles, rugby balls, or even UFOs.
I was alerted by a radar there was an object on his screen.
A globular spook over Kaikoura scared the bejesus out of credible pilots, and then we all fell off our credibility poofs when this Marlborough light was captured and dragged pulsating to Dougal at 6:30 to lead the news.
The Television One Network News with Dougal Stevenson.
There's been another sighting of what may be a UFO over the Kaikoura coast. With me in the studio are reporter Terry Olsen and soundman Lloyd.
This was also a time when 1 in 3 men were Dougal Stevenson.
It was still moving when I actually saw it.
This blob was the news for a while, although to many it just looked a lot like those glimpses of sunlight that squeeze between the fabric of your hat while sunbathing on your back at the beach, if you squint your eyes a bit. UFO mania peaked in the 1970s thanks to this man, Kiwi pilot Bruce Cathy, author of the Harmonic books. He believed that New Zealand was some sort of alien landing strip, but even his followers seemed a little confused.
By using your harmonic theory, I have, by substitution from my equation, reduced the physical world to the following relative equation. And I'm afraid it's not very clear in that bit there.
Remarkably, UFO hysteria coincided with the arrival of the sideburn.
I happened to look up and I saw two very bright lights.
It looked like a bright object in the sky. I was coming from that direction there.
I couldn't actually tell you the shape.
Well, I always have been rather sceptical about this type of thing.
The first one was seen at Waipuka on the 30th of October 1969 by 600 sheep, a guard dog, and a guard, and all were affected by it.
There was even a sighting from the back of a Gisborne shaggin' wagon.
You got to sort of remember that we got a Viva estate and we were sort of lying down with our heads to the back window looking up.
But it wasn't just the young and possibly bedraggled who saw these sources. Meet dairying duck Eileen Morland, who jabbered away all day to Louise Joyce, gypsy detective of the NZBC.
I stopped again, and these lights sort of come down very quickly towards the ground. Well, I didn't wait. I suddenly decided I'd better not be here, and I off. I couldn't imagine what it was. Actually, I suppose it was the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen. It was enormous. They were dressed in silver foil suits.
Before the advent of Winston Peters, Tauranga pensioners thronged to local halls to hear of these saviours from the stars. They even offered a fried food freebie for any extraterrestrial landing in the electorate.
I don't blame these people for not landing, especially if they go over Vietnam or Northern Ireland.
It'd be very unwise to land in a city because you would have a terrific job to prove that you were from outer space.
Just like Daleks and Coronation Street, UFOs too were scarier and far more credible in black and white.
So it goes on. Lyndon B. Johnson, former United States President, said at a press conference, "If we knew who constructed flying saucers, we would gladly order a few squadrons." He's not suggesting they didn't exist. He's only wishing he knew who constructed them. These men lead the United States. They're not mugs. They are not cranks either. Any more than I believe anybody here today is a crank.
And appealingly, there were claims from smokers at the time that aliens were already among us, incarnate in Kiwi form.
Has this happened?
Oh, definitely. People have. Wouldn't surprise me at all if people actually from outer space were at this meeting here today, the conference.
What do these people look like when you've seen them?
Completely humanoid, same as you and I are.
But when pushed for the answer from one suspected alien amongst us, more humble origins were proffered, perhaps to throw the reporter off the scent.
People here at the conference have suggested that you're not an Earthman. Can you tell me where you are from?
Whangarei. Penguins have always been the objects of fascination. Early Maori believed that penguins were aliens, but despite this, they often befriended the birds. And in one case, a chief even adopted a penguin and treated it as his own son. The legend has it that the penguin repaid the old man's kindness by defecating on his favourite cloak, and in return was made into a shrug. And as this recently discovered animated film shows, Maori were firm believers in all manner of fantastic stories. When the missionaries introduced Maori to God, Christ and Maori hit it off immediately. They got on like a house on fire and set alight a hot flame of belief which today can be seen spluttering in the altars of Brian Tamaki's Destiny Church. But Bishop Brian and his bag of tricks are B-grade compared to the great Maori prophets. They were inspired by divine messages with the voices of angels and God himself ringing in their ears. They were Old Testament, God's chosen people, brown Hebrews. But these early Maori religious movements were also driven by liberation theology and the politics of freedom from white rule. There were the legendary Ho-Ho. They decapitated their enemies and revived cannibalism. They wanted their land returned. So too did Takuti, who founded the Ringatu faith. There was the prophet Rua, who founded a new Jerusalem in the Ureweras. There was the Ratana Church still thriving today and Te Whiti's peaceful settlement at Parihaka. Parihaka was destroyed and Te Whiti arrested. Worse was to follow when Tim Finn tortured New Zealanders with his song Parihaka. Truly, this was white man's Utu.
The spirit of non-violence has come to fill the silence, yeah, now.
The prisoners of Parihaka were brought here to Dunedin, where they worked as slave labour, building this sea wall on the Otago Peninsula. An overlooked Maori prophet was Kevin Kaukau, high voodoo priest of demonic guitar rock. The cameras were afraid of him, preferring to linger on the other guys in his band, Golden Harvest. Some say Kaukau sold his soul to the devil. It's unlikely. The group were discovered playing in their garage in unsatanic Henderson. But with his lascivious manner and mastery of the dark art of playing lead guitar with his teeth, Kaukau was an early prophet of cunnilingus. New Zealand would never be the same. Our country is riddled with mumbo-jumbo, jiggery-pokery and kinesiology. But there's little doubt that no matter how stupid our beliefs, they have shaped our country. Whatever you believe, one thing is certain, and that is that nothing is. In this, our Aotearoa, land of belief.